Doing a response video to the economic video. Response to the comments anyway. I don't know if I'll get into anything deeper here or not. We'll see how it goes. Expanding the subject or something that people would actually comment to. But anyway, let's just play with Mariana's comments. Appreciate people commenting. Don't appreciate some of these comments, but we'll get to that. Alright, the reserves and excess reserves are on the liability side of the Fed's balance sheet. When the Fed wants less liquidity, it will then sell some of the assets. This is the only way for the reserves to drop. Well, again, it's not the only way for the reserves to drop. They can also drop by the banks loaning cash. And that will drop the reserves. So again, to say that these reserves can only be used one way by standard function of the Federal Reserve, I think is bullshit. Maybe there are contracts saying they can't touch the reserves. Explicit to what they've purchased, but again the argument is that they didn't purchase the stuff completely. They just purchased it in this digital way, and the reserves are just the record of the IOU. So it's essentially borrowed money. The Fed did not pay for the assets. It merely said to the banks, make the digits, I'll pay you for them later. And the idea is that they can reissue the assets they took off the market. So the idea is so at what time in the economic circumstance do you pay back debt? Is there a time when America has paid off its debt on purpose? I mean, outside of the tiny period where under the Clinton administration we ran a surplus, the United States government has never paid down its debt. So this whole idea that someday it's going to put this stuff back on the market does seem a little bogus, doesn't it? That there's going to be some opportune time in the economic future where things are going to be so good that the Fed is going to be willing to put $1 trillion of new assets on the market and devalue the stock market. I mean, everybody's going to see it happen, right? They're going to announce that they're going to do it. Everybody's going to know the stock market's going to go down. I mean, it'll be so obvious that won't everybody know it? And so won't it even create an anticipation crash of sorts? A kind of, everybody who's weak on the market will be weaker on the market and get the hell out? So won't it just create the very... I just don't see the day, okay? So... maybe, but I don't see the day. I don't see it happening where we're going to sit there and issue bonds, not only to pay the current deficit, right, every year. We always have to issue bonds to pay the current deficit, but we're going to reissue even more bonds, double the amount, okay, to get rid of this paper that we bought. No, I don't think so. And didn't pay for. Anyway. Banks can lend reserves to each other, but the reserve amount as a whole doesn't change until the Federal Reserve wants it to. Well, again, before 2008, that wasn't true. The reserve amount, the banks had to maintain their reserve amount. They maintained it. All right, if they made loans, they pulled the cash out of the reserve accounts, and they had to be responsible for that. So that was regulating how many loans they could issue, was how much they had in their reserves. That was how it was decided. So I mean, I just think it's bogus to say they don't have some traditionally the reserve accounts weren't their responsibility, because they were their responsibility. They let the money stay in there, or they took the money out, and the money went in there when the Federal Reserve in any way touched bank digits. Whenever it took cash in to clean it, it would always give the money back to the bank in the form of reserve digits. Anyway, this process is how the money-based interest rates were controlled. No, that's not. They were controlled by controlling what the reserve requirements were. So by increasing the reserve requirements, banks would make less loans, and if they reduced the reserve requirements, banks could make more loans. It's not up to the banks. Yes, well, whatever. When discussing the Fed and monetary policy, one can think in terms of neighborhood banking. One can't think in terms, they are completely different. Well, again, they're not completely different. The idea is that you mark down what happens. So, let me try to make an easy diagram of what we know is happening so far. So far in this picture. So let's say you got these containers. So you got the reserve container, the Fed's container of digits. All right. So and then you got the bankers. Bank digits. So you got Fed digits, FDs, and you got bank digits. And those two things are different things. But the one truth that exists in both of these worlds is cash is one way to make a digit. So if you want to increase the number of bank digits, if you put cash into a bank, that'll make a digit. And obviously if you take cash out of like another bank, is usually what happens. If you take cash out of a bank, then you'll reduce the digits, and so the total bank digits will be reduced. So that's pretty easy to follow, though. The cash makes a digit, taking cash out takes away a digit. Well, the same thing happens in the Fed. Okay, the Fed makes the digits, and the only way to get the digits out is to cash them out. All right, to get cashed out. And so what will happen is the Fed will decide eventually to get the digits out by getting cash for the stuff it owns. So the Fed has these are where it's keeping its digits, and let's say it's bought, these little commodities over here that it's holding with its name on them, these bonds and stocks. So what's going to happen is it'll put these on the market, get cash for them. Somebody will have to pay cash. That means they'll have to take out a banker digit, so they'll kill a bank digit, they'll convert it into cash, the cash will pay for this thing, okay, and then the Fed will take that cash to kill the digits in here. So cash in is what kills the digits, or cash out. It depends on how you want to look at it, but it's the same difference. But it's cash that does the transacting. And what's happening in this real banker's world over here, outside the cash market, is that cash is different than a digit, but technically you could say the digits are a claim on cash. And the other thing that creates digits besides cash going in, so if the Fed makes cash and it puts it into the banking system, it makes digits. But technically if it just puts a reserve number in here, that's just a cheat. Okay, instead of just printing the cash and taking the cash directly and putting it into the banking system, it put it in here. Okay, so it's just a purgatory it put the cash into, but the effect in this banking world was the same. It created digits that bought commodities, and that's the fact of it. So it's just IOUs. It's just borrowed money. This isn't the Federal Reserve putting money in here isn't much different than issuing a bond. So it basically issued a bond to buy bonds. Effectively, it refinanced its debt. In a way, it bought its old debt with a new debt. Right? Right. But the idea was to take it off the market. And the idea that when they put it back on the market, that's going to have an effect on the economy. And that's the part I'm saying, when is that going to happen? When do you think that's going to be realistic in the near future, where the overall economy is going to be doing so well that the Fed isn't going to be apprehensive about unloading a bunch of junk? Stuff that, too, also, let's understand, when it reissues this stuff, it's going to have to reissue it at some sort of premium, because nobody else would have bought this crap. Okay, this is crap. Right? This isn't good stuff. This is crap. All right? And they're not going to be able to issue it the way it is. They're going to have to increase the interest rate, because no one's going to buy these bonds. They have a crap interest rate. All right, well, anyway, back to what I was saying here. So the other way to create a digit, a bank digit, in the bank, is to put collateral in. So you put in an asset of some kind, a hard asset. Hard assets get put in as collateral, and they create digits, okay, that now can be used to buy other stuff. So it's basically the monetization of assets. So theoretically, if the banking system was working based on collateralized loans only, if you thought of it that way, that you had to have collateral to get a loan, then you would have a solid system in the sense that the only two ways bank digits could be created is with cash or a hard asset. And that'd be a pretty reliable system in some ways, because one would assume that the hard asset would have a greater value than the amount of the loan. So for example, in the mortgage market, traditionally, okay, a person had to put down a pretty substantial down payment of 30 or 40% to get a mortgage. And so the bank was automatically holding an asset worth more, much more, 30 or 40% more than the amount of the loan. So they had a $300,000 asset that they were holding, and they were loaning $150,000 or $200,000. So they were fairly secure in the fact that they were going to get their money, because not only did they have the person highly invested in the property and not wanting to lose all their money, but they had an asset that wasn't likely to drop that much that quickly. To deteriorate or degrade in its market value that substantially. And so that's a pretty reliable banking system. So yeah, there is a percentage of loans, whatever the percentage is, 30%, that are uncollateralized. And so, but those are in a different category anyway, that don't have anything to do with largely don't have anything to do with the Fed. They just have to do with businesses who want to take risk, and that kind of risk usually doesn't have any protection, or you're not going to get saved or rescued or be too big to fail if you've been giving away unsecured loans. But anyway, that's another way to create digits, is the bank just creates the digits based on some sort of trust it has with the person acquiring them. But we know that the safety against those loans is that the interest rates are much higher. So like in the credit card business, there's plenty of room for profit, because the people who do pay their bills pay such a high premium to protect against the ones who don't pay the bill. And and that's the truth of it. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, okay. When discussing the Fed and monetary, one can think in terms of neighborhood banking. They are completely different. Well, like I said, I sort of disagree. It's fundamentally barter digitized. It does have, the nature of it is still transacting, where you're basically trading things, and the digits have to be connected to a thing, generally speaking. So if there are a huge amount of digits, like the stock market digits currently are a claim on cash and a claim on the collateral the banks hold. So all the assets that created digits are claimed, okay, by those extra digits in the stock market. But clearly the total value of digits is too excessive to the real value of the commodity. So if there was ever such a thing as a run on reality, a run on hard cash or hard assets, somebody wasn't going to get their digit, can't buy it, because there's too many digits for too few. There's too many claims on the pieces of the pie for the size of the pie. So you'd have to make all the pieces of the pie worth a lot more, a lot bigger, to be able to feed the demand in terms of the digits. So everything's been oversold because of the interest demands primarily, but that's a whole other subject. The reserve requirements for regular banks are not the same as primary dealer banks. Well, regardless of whether they are or not, the reserve requirements, I mean, the Federal Reserve, what's in the Fed is all banks. So it doesn't, I mean, obviously some banks don't have very little part of that reserve monies they're entitled to, and other banks have a huge amount of that money that they're entitled to, so to speak, or is in their account. But I don't think there's any point in going through that. I mean, obviously we've seen the huge transition from $50 billion to $3.5 trillion, and that transition is because QE isn't done the way it used to be done, which was the purchases were made in cash. Primary dealers are subject to ever-changing rules of the Fed. Well, that we can agree on the ever-changing rules part. Obviously, 2008, the rules radically changed. There are usually contracts and repurchase agreements involved. Exactly. I mean, I don't even know if repurchase is the right word to use. We should call that reselling agreements. You know, that there's an agreement that the stuff being purchased with these fake digits on this loaned money in the reserve accounts is going to be put back on the market eventually, and real cash is going to be collected, and the banks are going to be able to keep that, and the reserve digits will be eliminated. You're right about the Fed basically buying up debt to take it off the market in order to push investors into risky assets. It's not about pushing them into risky assets. It's about pushing them. Okay, that's all. It's about releasing them to buy something else. They could buy solid assets with that extra money. So there's nothing about it that says buy risky. It's just saying here's your money. Go find something else to buy in the economy. The reason I say low interest rates forever is because I don't see a scenario in the near or distant probably the wrong one, where higher interest rates would be needed. Well, they're needed right now. I'm sorry. I mean, you can't, the Fed can't sell this crap now. It can't sell its bonds at these insipidly silly low interest rates to anybody who's not somehow connected through the banking system and isn't getting some other deal as part of the deal. Nobody would buy these bonds as investments because they're suck as investments. No one's going to buy a 10-year note looking at what the Fed is actually doing. No, you know, who would do that? Who would buy a 10-year commitment knowing what the Fed is doing? Knowing what the financial circumstances of the United States government is at 4%. Nobody rational, in my opinion, would do that. So I think it's just bullshit that interest rates aren't going to go a hell of a lot higher if the Fed has to actually sell this stuff to real people instead of itself. It seems deflation will be continuing battle for the Fed. Yeah, well, this whole deflation, inflation thing, again, this is getting to be, it should be a simple concept, whether money's getting, is gaining buying power or losing buying power. It should be whether cash is doing that relative to the economy. And it seems like the word is being used because we're putting weird things in this cart, this shopping cart we're defining as you know, what you have to pay for in life and where prices are heading. Obviously from the perspective of real estate and the stock market and oil, there hasn't been deflation, there's been huge inflation over the last 10 years. Gold, huge inflation in the price of gold. So, I mean, you can't really talk about deflation in an environment with commodity prices are increasing and wages are decreasing. So it's inflation from whose perspective or deflation from whose perspective. Obviously, from the rich man's perspective, it's deflation because his income is increasing and his what he has to pay laborers is decreasing. So from his perspective, it's certainly deflation. From somebody poor's perspective, all you can do is personally testify to the fact that I'm not paying less for my electricity than I was 5 years ago, or my gas. I'm not paying less for my rent. I'm not paying less for anything. So obviously there's no deflation in my world. Alright, so anyway, she posted a link to this article from the Cleveland Fed. The problem with it is 10 years old. So it wasn't very valuable. I mean, it's 2010 article, so it's 4 years old now. And so it's of limited value because they're talking about, the QE2 and we're on QE3 already. They didn't even anticipate that happening, and they talked about this, slow process of, redistributing these assets, and that everything would just kind of wind down, blah, 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 blah. I don't see any evidence of the wind down, and it doesn't talk at all about what happens if banks have a liquidity crisis and demand the digits we told them to liberate, that we didn't pay for. Sorry, they're going to want their money. If the shit hits the fan, they're going to want their money. And I don't think that's going to be inconsequential. Alright, so this Mr. Stefan RB guy, who I will block, says, as long as Gary's check shows up every month, what does he care about any of this? Like, look, I made a video on a subject. You can't talk about the subject without getting personal. You do this all the time. I mean, what do you put up? I mean, if you would show me how you're such a great guy, you know what I mean? If you had your proof of what a hard worker you've been and what a productive motherfucker you've been in your life and all the skills you have, well, then you could make a comment like this and you might be saying something, but you just have some kind of evidence of it. Where's the book you've written? Where's the disease you've cured? Where's the anything you've done in your motherfucking scummy life except whatever, fucking an ugly woman and making dumb, stupid kids? Beyond that, but ugly kids, I bet. What have you done, fuckface? So if you're not willing to put up, then you shut the fuck up, motherfucker. I mean, it's just so fucking rude. I mean, prove you're a better man, fucker. Alright. And I don't know why Mariana chooses to comment to that. But she goes, nobody cares about this. I should just crawl back under my rock, LOL. Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter what anybody cares about it. I mean, you obviously care about it. I obviously think it's an interesting subject. It wouldn't hurt if somebody on planet Earth gave a shit. And if you want to say, well, there's only 2 people that give a shit, therefore I'll shut up, that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, because then even less people are talking about something you think people probably should be thinking about and talking about. So that doesn't make any sense. So then Butthead chimes in for no good reason. True. What true? That she lives under a rock? What part is true, shithead? I mean, jeez. Unless one faces the fact the system is rigged and controlled, one will sit as Gary does, scratching their skull. I'm not scratching my skull. I'm making direct statements that you're not countering with anything called evidence, fuckhead. Yeah, that's right. You're just a truther idiot on top. Is that what it is? You're just some sort of truther idiot who thinks the Bloomingbergs have, rigged the system? Is that what you think? You don't think that the human race, the American people, voluntarily voted for voodoo economics? They voluntarily said it's okay to run deficits, to give tax cuts to the rich? You don't think they voted for that shit overtly? Mr. Rich Man will take care of me? Ronald Reagan says all the little boats will float, and they didn't buy it willfully, openly. There wasn't any chicanery here. You didn't need no Bloomingberg to fool everybody, okay? People overtly voted for voodoo economics. I mean, Reagan won 2 terms, you retard. I mean, fuckhead. And that was after voodoo economics. And Contra, and birthday cakes to the Ayatollah, and all kinds of other bullshit. Alright, anyway, the plan is the same as always been. Print more money. Well, you're just ignoring the subject then, right? Obviously, they didn't print the money. They put digits in reserve accounts. They borrowed the money once again. They didn't print the money. They borrowed digits. I mean, borrowing digits is a little different than issuing a bond, but in the end, it's pretty much the same deal. We're paying interest on borrowed digits. The losers are the people who trade real for not. Well, whatever that means. That be average working people across the globe. Well, whatever. Average working people, or like I said, voted for this shit. Average working people seem to think they're all going to win the lottery and be billionaires someday, and therefore they find it obnoxious to have something like rational inheritance taxes. The elite care not a whit. Well, apparently the poor care not a whit. Okay, again, it's the poor, ignorant, stupid motherfucking butt shits in Arkansas and Alabama and places like that who vote for this shit. So yeah, they should shoot them in the coal mine because they're too fucking stupid to figure out who the enemy is. About printing, since they bring nothing of value to the equation to start with. Well, that's it. They are parasites. That's right, we voted for parasites. Okay, people love rich people. They think Bill Gates is cool. Alright, so yes, if you want to gripe, don't gripe at me, you dumb ass wipe. The person who has been complaining about those rich fucking parasites for fucking decades. Why don't you go talk to the average fucking American? You got a little hawk in your picture like you're some sort of, right-winger. Hey, fuckhead. Yeah, really. I mean, that's not exactly the commie symbol, you butt shithead. Fucking asshole. 2008 was a result of crazy international people who decided to bring some sanity to the table. Well, bullshit. It was about the fucking insane bubble in the real estate market. I mean, they were giving they were letting people buy fucking houses on credit cards, for Christ's sakes. That wasn't going to work. Alright, anyway, this Chris guy, we'll read a couple of this anyway. There is really only one possible outcome for all this. Someone is going to take a big hit. Well, that will be the outcome, right? The hit will have to happen. And there's only, you have to either excrete huge amounts of productivity from human workers, which seems unlikely since we're becoming more and more disposable every day, more and more useless every day. So unless you have like some kind of degree in, I don't know, plastic physics, yeah, unless you can make like iPod plastic super shiny, you have that skill, you're pretty much useless. You're worth $12.58 an hour if you're lucky. Someone is going to take a big hit. That's right. So it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to excrete any productivity out of us. So it does seem likely that some rich people are not as rich as they think they are. Since the American people will not, at least I hope not, go quietly into financial slavery. We're already in financial slavery. The question is, will we peacefully go into cannibalism or something? I mean, a disgusting, horrid, grotesque dystopia, okay, where all the rich people live on like the top 10 floors of all the tallest buildings in Manhattan and hire an army of, Terminators and cyborgs to, kill us all because, we're just useless. A lot of rich bankers are going to get stuck with some worthless bonds. Well, they're already protecting themselves against that. I think that's sort of what the racket the game is right now, is they're basically selling off all the crap to the U.S. government. Cue the Icelandic national anthem, please. Yeah, well, guess what? I don't think this is Icelandic. I don't think the way it's going, the bankers are going to be the losers. That's going to take some tough congressmen and senators, right? What, you're going to grow one of those in America? I don't think so. Who basically say, we're not buying those bonds back, and we don't care what your credit rating is. Well, the point is that we have to pay the bonds, and that's the problem. And you can't pay them back, and you can't pay the interest on them if there was real interest on them. So there's no game to play here anymore. It's over. The rents are too high. There's too many rents for every transaction. There's more rent. It's like they take mortgages, which are already rent on commodity, like a surplus. I basically give my house to a banker. He turns it into an income producer, and I provide the income. And where do I get it from? I have to pay that tax. And then he takes a whole bunch of those and packages them in a stock and gives those people some more interest. And so it's just this interest on top of interest on top of interest. It's rent on top of rent. It's like we are getting resold. So it's like a reseller. It's like the house I live in, somebody could be a reseller, and he could work for the landlord, and he could rent it from the landlord and then re-rent it to me. Or he could re-rent it to somebody else who re-rents it again. And they could all add $50 to the price. And eventually I can't live here because too many people are making $50. Get it? Yeah, well, I'm sure you do get it. The whole system will collapse, and then they will build a new one. Maybe that's what's needed. Yeah, well, building a new one out of what is the question. Because if they're allowed to go too far, it's going to take you an awful long time to build a new one. Especially when you're running out of oil and all that kind of crap, and the greenhouse thing and all that crap is dooming and looming. It's really quite remarkable what Iceland pulled off in a non-violent way. Well, they only pulled it off in a non-violent way because, Britain didn't want to show up with a bunch of machine guns and kill them. But there's a lot of nations that'll never do business with Iceland, probably, right? But I'm happy for them that they just decided to bail out of the economic system, so that was great. But I don't know whether they're going to fix their own problems internally anyway. Hmm? I mean, you know, they think everybody can just sit around and have babies all day and get 10 months leave and all that kind of crap. That ain't going to go too far. Anyway, something I don't know until reading more on this weekend was that the Federal Reserve Bank actually has been netting a profit each year. Well, that's sort of bullshit. Obviously, they're netting a profit in a preposterous way. They're playing with monopoly money and they're causing the board game that they're playing in to produce a few dollars. But that isn't really profit when you think of what they've cost us in digits that they've created. So they've done huge damage to cash for that profit. So you sort of have to look at that way. Their real books are not they're not in the red. I mean, they're not in the black in terms of what they've done to cash, what liabilities they've created on cash. So I won't get into the whole treasury bullshit. So anyway, probably enough of a video. So any further comments? I don't know what the next subject will be. I think we've kind of beaten this one to death. I mean, the whole idea of how to predict the crash of the digit pyramid, and that's sort of what it is. It's a pyramid or a obelisk or a qualahedron of digits that's just hanging over us. It's just gonna, just gonna fall off its little pedestal and smash us. And the idea of how it's sustainable, like I said, I just don't see how it can possibly be sustainable in a real world where people expect, if they buy something, for it to produce an income. If you spend $1 million for something, you expect to get a return on your money. And that expectation is not consistent with zero interest rates. So who's going to invest in something where they're not going to have a realistic prospect of garnering profit? They're then going to start running to some durable asset that may go down in the short term, but it'll go down a lot less than everything else. And that's where they're going to start looking. So, enough said.